Hello, I'm Mario Taniguchi, co-editor-in-chief of Retail Insider. Joining me today is Bruce Winder, who is a retail analyst and author. Thanks for joining us today, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Mario.
I almost had a slip of the tongue there and almost called you Tim because we're talking about we're talking about Tim Hortons
That's right.
and lots happening these days. And just as for some context here, a couple of weeks ago, Food Task Tech announced that they were going to bring Dunkin' Donuts back to Canada, about 300 locations eventually. And so, how does Tim Hortons respond to the last week or so? Two news releases. One that they're going to renovate and a number of stores and build and open a number of new stores, and then the big announcement that they're going to hire 10,000 local, keyword local employees. So, are Tim Hortons scrambling right now? Do you think, Bruce?
Well, I think they're making adjustments to the market. I mean, I listened to part of their Q1 earnings call in early May before the Dunkin' announcement, and they'd already planned to open and refurbish a number of stores, several hundred. And Tim Hortons comp store sales were up about 1.5%, which they blame mostly the weather and customer sentiment. But one has to think that once the Duncan announcement was made, they sat down, they performed some scenario analysis, they ran some financials, and they probably said, you know what, we need to sort of up our game a little bit here, because there was a fairly large outcry, positive outcry toward Duncan on social media. I scan most of the social media networks, and if you look at X, there was a big outcry about how, Canadians were looking for maybe some competition to sharpen up Tim's game as it relates to quality and order accuracy and cleanliness and things like that. So they probably took a look at it and said, you know what, we have a vulnerability here. Let's get in front of this. Let's get proactive. And that's why we're seeing some of the announcements we have now.
Yeah, and I noticed in the press releases by Tim Hortons, they were very strong in talking about their Canadian heritage
Mhm.
and that image. Do you think that that iconic Canadian image has been eroded over time?
Yeah, I think it has a little bit. You look at, maybe as they've mentioned, some of their aggressive practices with the temporary foreign workers program and the lobbying. And, just the fact that, I think some Canadians know that although they have an office here, they're managed mostly out of Miami and they're
Yeah.
owned by a Brazilian company. So I think they still have a good positive image as Canadian, but for some people in some circles, that's eroded. And you never know, they might be starting to feel a little bit of that on their sales line.
Yeah, and you mentioned the temporary foreign workers program. Uh, from again the same thing with me, looking at a lot of the social media posts out there, and some are pretty nasty, and
Hmm. Hmm.
very nasty, and all that stuff. But you think that that was a really bad move on their part, to go that route and at the expense of, say, Canadian workers, and that's what the outcry has been on social media over the years.
Yeah, I think it's like most things. It was a bit of a pendulum swing. So during the pandemic, there was about 1 million jobs short in Canada. A lot of companies had to, increase their percentage of temporary foreign workers. And it probably swung a bit too far for some companies, including Tim's. But now, one of the realities out there over the last couple of years is that youth unemployment's about 14%. So I think if you're Tim's, you might say, how do I take lemons and turn it into lemonade?
Mhm.
And say, look, you know what? Let's ramp down our approach with the TFW, the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, and let's try to hire some Canadians out there and reduce that unemployment rate. And also, there's an opportunity, like I said, for them to sort of fill a vulnerability, that might be leveraged by Duncan as they come in. So I think it probably serves a number of purposes for Tim's.
Now, the other thing too, I wanted to ask you about, Tim's has evolved, right, over time, like anybody else, really. But you know what you expected back, for Tim Hortons even 10 years ago, you go in for your double double and a Boston cream donut, and you're out, right? And now you've got pizzas, you've got all sorts of stuff.
Mm.
Uh, do you think that was the right move for them to kind of go into all these different directions and not just focus on their bread and butter, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I mean, I think they're finding a better balance because it's a balance between trying to grow sales and try to grow revenue per guest by offering other types of products, food products above and beyond donuts. And I think they realized this a couple of years ago. If you offer too much, it dilutes the brand, and probably more importantly, it messes up the operations at the restaurants
Hmm.
because it takes too long to serve a customer or it adds complexity to the
Yeah.
experience. So I think they've even admitted a couple of years ago they dialed back some of their menu innovations to try to, be selective in where they expand.
Yeah. Now, when you look at that industry, the coffee, so to speak, industry in Canada, how can it manage to have all these different places? We got more 300 more like Dunkin' Donuts coming in. Like, what's your take on the coffee industry these days out there?
Yeah, it's an interesting industry. I mean, certainly Tim Hortons dominates it. They have about 4,000 restaurants. They're going to add about 80 more and refurbish about 400.
Yeah.
But you look at McDonald's has about 1,500 restaurants and Starbucks has about 1,500. So it's a pretty saturated market, and that doesn't include all the mums and pops and other smaller brands. It's going to be a bit of an uphill climb for Dunkin', but I think what Dunkin's doing, probably a good idea, is they're trying to focus on a niche. They're trying to focus on a younger consumer and try to have, cool drinks and things like that. They've hired in the US Sabrina Carpenter and some other celebrities. So their best approach is to try to differentiate from the existing behemoths. But I mean, certainly Tim's has by far the largest market share in coffee.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Bruce, for joining us today.
Thanks, Mario. Have a great day.
You too. That was Bruce Winder, who is a retail analyst and author. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, co-editor in chief of Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.